Good afternoon, social workers of Minnesota. It is so fun to see you all, have you all here with me today. I shouldn't say see you all since I can't see your pictures in today's session, but I do just want to say happy Social Work Month to each and every one of you. Today is a kickoff for our Social Work Month celebrations here at the chapter, NASW Minnesota. And our theme this year for Social Work Month is The Time is Right for Social Work. My name is Karen Goodenough. I'm Executive Director of NASW Minnesota, the National Association of Social Workers, Minnesota chapter. And I have with me today one of our awesome MSW interns, Alicia Vang. Alicia, give a little wave. Alicia is my sidekick for today's session. She's handling questions that come into the chat. If you have issues with the technology, if you have questions about things that you haven't heard me answer, or maybe a link to something that you're looking for throughout today's session, you can send a note in the chat to Alicia and she will handle that. Also, just a quick note that any questions you have for today's session, we don't have a public chat for today's session, but you can go ahead into the questions tab and drop questions, comments, thoughts, concerns, anything you have in there. Throughout today's session, Alicia will also be sharing with you links to all sorts of things that I'll be talking about, and you can keep track of those. We could also send out that list of links after today's session. At the end of today's session, we'll send you a copy of the slides from today, so you don't have to jot down those notes quickly if you want to just listen. We'll send you those slides, we'll send you a list of all of the links, and also a copy of the CEU for today's session. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and get us started. We're at just over 100 people so far, and we had almost 300 that registered for today's session. So we will be gathering with a few more people throughout our session today. Also, just a note that we are recording today's session and it will be put up on our chapter YouTube channel within the next couple of days. So if you miss anything, or if you have friends and colleagues that you think it would be fun for them to also hear this and get one free CEU, you can also share that with them. So we will make sure to send you the link to the YouTube recording as soon as it's up there also. So again, happy Social Work Month, folks. Our theme this year is The Time is Right for Social Work. And we know as social workers that the time is always right for social work, right? However, we know also that more people are entering the field of social work. I think it's partially because of the just awesome life-affirming services that social workers provide. And we know that they're needed more than ever. In the midst of our nation grappling with COVID-19, systemic racism, economic equality, global warming, the multitude of crises that we're struggling with, I think that's why our theme of Social Work Month 2022 is so important for us. This year's campaign, so I should say our Social Work Month theme comes from our national NASW office, and every year they send out a list of potential theme ideas to all of the execs across the country and ask us to weigh in. What seems like a fit for what we're all talking about in our chapters across the country? We weigh in. This is the one that got voted in. So if you ever wonder, like, who comes up with that theme? That's a little bit about how it comes up. But if you ever have a great idea for a theme, send me your ideas, and I'd be happy to send those on to folks at our national office. There's lots of reasons we do this. Part of it is for sort of a rallying point for social workers across the country to talk about something together, but it's also an opportunity for us to educate the public about the amazing work that social workers do. So our national office does all sorts of public sort of campaign work, and I'll tell you a little bit today about what we're doing in Minnesota to raise this this set of our voices and messages to others across Minnesota as well. There's a couple of hashtags on the slide here. If you're a hashtagger person, if you want to send a note to all of your friends on social media and wish them happy Social Work Month with a hashtag, that's really fun also. And there's also, Alicia will share a link to some materials from our national office, and there's always a whole website or page on our national website at socialworkers.org that's all about Social Work Month and has tons of resources and videos and things that you could use for all sorts of purposes. So feel free to check that out as well. Now in Minnesota, I am so proud and excited to make sure you all know that Governor Walz once again declared March Social Work Month in Minnesota. So this is one of those cool things that anyone can ask the governor to say, we want you to proclaim March Social Work Month. We want you to proclaim May something else month, right? And their office can choose to do it or not. And every month of the year, usually it's proclaimed multiple things. So it's not just Social Work Month in Minnesota. It's probably several other things that have been proclaimed as part of March in Minnesota. But here's a copy of the proclamation. I think Alicia has a copy of it that she can send you a link to in the chat as well. But you can also get to it from our website if you want to utilize it for all sorts of purposes. But it says some really cool things about us that I love to highlight. I know you can't see them probably on my slide. It's too big to make readable in here, but a few things that it says just to highlight. It talks about whereas, the first one says, whereas for decades, the social work profession has been dedicated to improving society's well-being and enhancing the basic needs of all people, especially those who have been most impacted during the COVID-19 pandemic. Whereas social workers are the largest group of mental health care providers in the United States and work daily to help people both in person and remotely overcome substance use disorders, mental illnesses, and trauma, and a whole bunch of other really cool things about social workers. So I encourage you to read the proclamation and to share it widely. If we haven't already, we'll share it on our Facebook page sometime probably this week. And you can go ahead and share that widely with your friends and colleagues as well on all of your social media platforms. Now, throughout today's session, I want to share a bunch of things that I think it is the time for us to pay attention to. So when we think about the time is right for social work, I think the time is right for social work to be a voice for our profession and articulate what makes us different. So this is my first message to all of you about what I think the time is right for us, all right? So I think the time is absolutely right for us as a profession to come together and be a voice for the profession. And when we do that, when we can articulate across all of us 17,000 plus strong licensed social workers in Minnesota, it helps the messaging. Okay, it helps the world know who we are and what we do. Now, there are nearly 720,000 social workers in the nation. And we know that in thousands of ways, social workers help people help themselves. They assist people in every age and every background in many different industries and settings. And whether you're new to the profession or you are seasoned and been around for a long time, you are making a really important positive impact on society throughout your career. And we thank you for that. Our community thanks you for that. But so many people don't know the breadth and depth of all that social workers do. And so one of the things we have to do as a profession is to be able to articulate ourselves what we do and what makes us different. I love, there's a piece that I've shared in multiple Social Work Month presentations in the past about you'll need a social worker when. And if you Google it, you will find it. It's this beautiful like couple page list of the myriad of times in a person's life when they might need a social worker. And I would encourage you to, throughout your career, throughout your work, to draw light to all of the things that social workers can do, because we know that in social theories of socialization, people only know about what they've experienced, what they've seen. So young people in particular, when they're thinking about what professions they are thinking about going into, they only know the ones that they've heard about or experienced before. So if they've had a social worker in their family's life, maybe someone who helped an elderly family member through the hospice process, they know that social workers do hospice. But if as a young person, they never worked with a social worker themselves, needed therapy, other services, they might not know that social workers are clinicians. They might not know that social workers work in youth centers and do all sorts of youth development work. They may not know that social workers work in schools or in nursing homes or in policy work or in leadership. And so we have to, both for our young people and for people of all ages, we have to be a voice for the breadth and depth of all that social workers do so people know. Now, just a couple of things for your articulation when you're talking with people about what social workers do. I think social workers themselves have a hard time articulating what it is that makes us different from other professionals. So we know that in thousands of ways, social workers help people help themselves. People from every age, every background, every corner of the country, wherever we're needed. We know that social workers are uniquely qualified to help people in their own environment. And that person and environment framework is something that we utilize every day and is different from what other helping professionals utilize as their framing. So I think that's important to call out. I think that we also work to make sure people get the resources and support that they need from the best resources available. So social workers are knowledgeable about the resources out there in our world. Many of you as social workers hear from people in your families, your friends, your colleagues who are like, hey, you're a social worker. Do you know someone that helps people with adoption? I have a friend who wants to adopt, right? And so often I feel like in our families in particular, we all have like a person we go to. My sister's a physical therapist, so everyone calls on her whenever they have a medical question. And she's always like, I'm a physical therapist, I'm not a doctor. Let's be real about that. But as social workers, I think we have often a very broad understanding of the resources that are available in our world because we care, because we pay attention, because we are well resourced. And so that's important for us to lift up. We also reach every part of the community, as we talked about, in all of those different areas of practice. When we think about accomplishments of social workers, here's some that I think you could articulate. That throughout history, social workers have fought for civil rights and voting rights, for minimum wage and employment rights, reproductive rights, racial equity, immigration. Um, we are currently and have been working on telehealth, right? There are lots of things that we are diligently working on, like telehealth expansion, making it a permanent thing in Minnesota because our telehealth opportunities are going to expire in about a year. And so we have to keep working on some of these things. We also continually are working across the country on things like conversion therapy bans. We're currently working on an interstate compact for licensure and all sorts of other things, right? We're working on equitable reimbursements for our clinical social workers. All sorts of things that we think are very important for our profession and for the services that we provide. Now, when we think about what sets us apart, I also think it's important to clarify who we are and the space that we take up in our world. So in particular, I like to draw attention to our clinically trained professionals. That according to SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, professional social workers are the nation's largest group of mental health service providers. There are actually more clinically trained social workers, over 300,000, which is more than psychiatrists, psychologists, and psychiatric nurses combined. That's huge. That's a huge lift for us as a profession. It's a way that we are really involved in our world. And too many people don't even know that social workers are clinically trained professionals, that they can provide treatment and therapeutic services, be paid through insurance, all those sorts of things. So that is something we need to continue to lift up and articulate. You know, we think about why hire a social worker. This is just this beautiful little graphic that Alicia put together about, you know, what highlights some of the skills and experiences and things that social workers bring, some of the competencies that we have. I think you could lift up a whole myriad of things yourselves. I like to highlight some basic data points. Like there are more than, as I said, 720,000 professional social workers in the US. We have all sorts of degrees. About 34% of us have bachelor's degrees, 57% have MSWs, and 2% have doctoral or PhD degrees. I think it's really important. We're also very experienced. We should highlight the fact that we are trained not only with the book smarts, but also the skills to do the work. We have extensive internships. We utilize that person and environment framework. We have a nationwide system of accreditation that our universities go through that ensures that we have some level of rigor and some level of consistency in what it means to be educated as a social worker across our country. And that is not true for many other degrees. I also think that it's important to lift up that social workers are ethical, that we abide by a common code of ethics that we all ascribe to, and we've blended our experience and our education and our ethical principles into this beautiful like construct of skills and expertise that we bring to the table that help people meet all of their challenges in life. Here's some of the values that we have as social workers that are articulated in our code of ethics, right? We put our service to others above our own self-interest and help people in need in all sorts of ways. We value every person and treat them with respect no matter their differences. We believe that every relationship is built on trust. We have integrity in the work that we do. We ensure continued competence by requiring a certain number of ongoing continuing education in our states. We believe in the dignity and worth of every person that we come in contact with. I think those are really valuable and important for us to articulate to the world that these are things that lift us up and make us different. Now, when we think of other things that I think it's the time is right for, another is the time is right for us to bust some myths about social workers, okay? And I want to state right up front that it is important that we never restate a myth, okay? Never restate the language of the myth. Share the truth instead. Research actually shows that when you restate a myth, whether you're trying to or not, you are reinforcing the myth itself by even stating it. Okay, so for example, we're putting together a handout for legislators right now in Minnesota to help them understand us better as a profession. Okay, so instead of saying, let's say for one of these, for example, one myth is that social workers' job is to take children away from their families, right? We would never say that, even if we were stating it in a column of like, here are myths, because when you put it on a list, people read it and they don't always read the context. And so then we're reinforcing that myth. So we're going to say things in that handout for our legislators, like not just anyone can call themselves a social worker. We have title protection in Minnesota. And then we'll go on and talk about the county exemption and how, in light of our county exemption, we do have people in our state who are called social workers who are not necessarily trained social workers. So we have some work to do in that particular area. We know that, you know, social workers do all sorts of really hard jobs. And we want to call out that we value maintaining relationships between children and families in whatever system we're talking about. We talk about the many areas of practice social workers work in. We talk about our social work workforce becoming more diverse and it being a goal of NASW in particular, and our social work world more broadly to become a more diverse workforce purposefully. We know that statistically speaking, about 83% of all social workers are women, right? We don't want to continue to state that because that's not what we want to see in our workforce, but we want to talk about prioritizing diversification in our workforce through recruitment and education and social justice and being a welcoming and both an accessible profession for all people. We also know that our clinically trained folks can provide clinical social work services autonomously in any practice setting to individuals, couples, groups, all of those. And we also know that there are barriers to this, that there are still things in our state laws in Minnesota that state that our profession, in particular, our clinical social workers, cannot either do a particular clinical service or be paid for a particular clinical service. And we don't have time today to go into all the details on that. Those are for some of our social policy conversations, and I'm happy to talk with any of you individually about it. But those are things we are trying to fix in state statute to make sure that every clinical social worker is able to do the work they are trained to do and bill for the work that they are trained to do. I think as a really important follow-up to all of that is that I think the time is right for us collectively to accomplish our goals at the Minnesota State Capitol. Okay, we are stronger as a body. When I think about what NASW has been doing over the last several years, stepping up our game in terms of policy work, we've hired a lobbyist. I've doubled her hours from last year to this year, and I plan to extend her hours into next year. Jenny Arneson is our lobbyist. If you haven't met her yet, she is an amazing master's level social worker, bachelor's and master's level social worker, who's also a Minneapolis school board member, and just so insightful and experienced in this work, and she is helping us really expand our efforts in policy. If you haven't seen her yet in maybe our rollout of our legislative agenda, you will absolutely meet her in a few weeks during Social Work Advocacy Week, which I'm going to talk about in just a little bit. But we are well poised as a profession to get this work done at the Capitol. We have the energy. We have an amazing Social Policy Action Network, a policy committee that is doing our legislative agenda work. Our PACE committee, which is our PAC, that is taking money that social workers have given us to help support legislators who are running for election in Minnesota and help us decide who we're going to back as a profession in Minnesota. If any of you are interested in being part of any of that policy work, either deciding who we back in the coming election or getting involved in policy advocacy work on any issues, please reach out to me and I'd be happy to engage you in that work. But here are some of the things that are our priorities as a constituency this year. So our NASW Minnesota legislative priorities are these 4, plus undergirded by all things community safety. So we are absolutely watching the community safety work unfold in the state, and also, as I talking about elevating and diversifying the social work profession, talking with legislators about who we are, what makes us different, what we need in terms of their support to help diversify our profession, talking about things like loan forgiveness, talking about things like funding support for supervision requirements, making sure that our social workers in our state can get all of their licensure supervision through virtual supervision. Okay, so right now by law, we have to still get 25% of our licensure supervision through in-person time. And we know that that's sort of ridiculous in the current world that we live in. And if we can do telehealth and we can do our jobs virtually, we can absolutely get our supervision virtually. So we have a bill that we are working on, and I think has some legs this year to get that changed to 100% virtual. We don't have time to go through all of these. If you're interested in hearing more about these, our session, our legislative agenda launch session was recorded and is in our YouTube channel. So if you want to hear more about any of these priorities and what we're working on this session, watch that and then join us during Advocacy Week. I also think that, sort of as a follow-up to that, it is time for social workers to get the credit and the professional autonomy that they deserve, okay? You all do amazing work. You should have professional autonomy to make decisions in your workplace and not have someone from some other profession having to oversee it, okay? I absolutely believe that. When I think about that, credit, professional autonomy, one of the things that comes up for me is our job outlook, right? So social work is a growing profession. Overall, we are projected to grow 12% between 2020 and 2030, so in this decade, faster than all other occupations. We will have about 78,300 openings for new social workers each year on average over the decade. That's a lot of new social workers. Many of those openings are expected to result from people needing to replace workers who move into different occupations. And that's true both directions. So we're seeing more people leaving social work and going into other fields. And we're also seeing more people from other fields coming into our profession and joining us later in their careers. And we're also seeing lots of people exiting the labor force in light of retirement. And so there's a need for us to continue to grow our schools of social work. As many of you have seen and been watching over time, our schools of social work are growing exponentially and have been. And there will continue to be a need for them to continue to add more capacity to our field. In terms of some other just details on our employment outlook, we talked about that 12% growth overall that we're looking for. There's also projected about a 13% growth in child, family, and school social workers, 13% growth in healthcare social workers, faster again than the average for all occupations, and a 15% growth in mental health and substance abuse positions. So I think that's fascinating. Those are sort of our biggest, largest growing areas of our profession in the next decade. I think the time is also right, and we've been talking about this for a couple of years, folks, but I will double down on this. I think it is time for social workers to get paid what they're worth. And I mean that in lots of different ways. I mean that in parity with other professions. And I also mean that in ways like paid internships. You would never, I shouldn't say never, you would almost never see a business major do an internship in a for-profit industry and not get paid for that internship. And I want to see that as the norm in our profession, that we are paying our interns. We know in our organizations that so many of our organizations count on our interns, that they are an important part of us getting our work done. And last year, for the first time, this last year, NASW is putting our money where our mouth is on this, and we are paying our interns. Every one of our interns is getting a stipend this year. And I feel like it's significant. We're paying, I don't want to misspeak, so I'm not going to say it. But if you're interested in exactly what we're paying, I want you to email me. Let's talk about that. But I think it's important that we ante in something to support our students and that we're helping to support their education. They're providing a valuable service in our agencies, okay? But we also need to get paid in parity with other professionals in our workspaces. And I also think that as social workers, we need to be talking about our work in this virtual world differently. So people have been holding, for example, they've been holding me up as an exec in Minnesota and saying I should be paid in parity with other executive directors of nonprofits in Minnesota. But guess what, folks? I'm now a virtual executive director. I run a statewide association where people attend our stuff from all over the country. And I could now go be a virtual executive director for all sorts of agencies across the country. Now, I'm not planning to go anywhere. I don't say that to scare anyone. I love what I do here, but I want you all to be using language like that. Like your skills are growing, your expertise is growing, and you should be able to compete in the workforce differently than you did prior to the pandemic also. And that will continue to shift and change. And you need the words to articulate that in your workplaces. Here are some salary facts. I think when we are arguing for being paid what we're worth, it's also important that we know a little bit about where we sit, all right, in terms of other professions, but also just within our own profession. And so I want to share some salary facts with all of you. One just important little fact is that the Department of Veterans Affairs is the largest employer of social workers in the nation. There are more than 15,000 master's degree prepared social workers on staff at the Department of Veterans Affairs. I think that's fascinating. I also know that our VA in Minnesota is one of those places that pays their interns and that they get some of the highly sought after interns because people clamor for those paid positions. So I will want you competing for the best, but I also think that's something for us to strive for also. In terms of other salary facts, we know that males have higher salaries than females within our profession. I think that's a problem, especially when I stated earlier that 83% of social workers are female. That small number of males making more than our females, it's not okay. We need some equity in that. I also think in terms of gender, we should stop dichotomizing our genders, right? So we need to be inclusive of all gender expressions. And the fact is that our data right now, in terms of so many things, is only collected in certain ways. And so I can only speak to males and females right now, and that's a problem also. By census division, our Pacific region has the highest paid social workers. Our South Central region of the country has our lowest paid social workers. By degree, our DSWs and PhDs have the highest salaries. Our MSWs the second highest. Based on roles, I don't think that's surprising to people, but I think it's important to call out. Metropolitan areas, similarly, not surprising, have higher salaries than our rural areas. One of these that I think is really fascinating is by caseload. We know that social workers without caseloads have the highest salaries. So people in leadership positions, working in policy, anyone who doesn't have a job with a caseload is paid more than people with them. That's a problem in our society in terms of how we hold people up and what we pay them, right? Just like teachers and so many other not as well paid professionals. But social workers with 11 to 15 or 26 to 50 clients have the lowest salaries. So in my mind, some of those people with some of the highest caseloads have some of the lowest salaries. And we know those are in areas of practice. You all can maybe think of those areas of practice where they're trying to work with this myriad number of clients. And those are hard jobs. We also know that private practice has the highest social work salaries, both private practice and for-profit social work, so people who are working in corporations as well, and that our nonprofits are paying the lowest. That's actually a problem of how we fund our nonprofit sector in Minnesota. At our symposium session at the end of March, on March 25th, we're going to be talking about that in particular and how we compete in this capitalist society that we work in. So if you're interested in that, join us for that session. And by years of experience, you're going to see your salary grow by about $1,400. I'm sorry, 1,400. I wish it was 1,400. $419 a year by year of practice experience. Now, there are some other variables in relationship to salaries that I think are interesting to point out. Our MSW salaries are about $13,000 on average higher than BSW salaries. PhDs and DSWs earn 20 to 25,000 more than our MSWs. Males are about 1,200 more than females. So it's actually not as significant of a difference. So I want to make sure we call that out, that we're not talking about a big difference that we need to change. We're talking about a smaller amount. I love this stat that our PhD females are earning 7,000 more on average than our males. As a recent PhD graduate, I appreciate that, but I also think we need equity in our field as well. People also, MSWs earn more in our research organizations and government agencies and hospital inpatient facilities. Those are our highest paid areas of practice. And one other thing I just want to make sure we point out, because many people don't understand this, but when you look at salary data for social workers, I want you to look really critically at the data, where it comes from, and who they're including in it, okay? So when you think about social work salaries, all right, and we compare them to any other profession, when we look at national data, they are almost always lumping all social workers together, because social workers have bachelor's, master's, and DSW and PhD degrees. They lump them all together and then average us out. And then if you take that average and you compare it to maybe a nurse or a psychiatric nurse or someone with another clinical degree, like an LMFT or something else, it's going to look like we make so much less than they do. And the reality is that people can't do those other jobs with bachelor's degrees. They have to have a master's degree or higher in order to even do that job, or specialized experience or licensure to do that job. And so that job always looks on average like the salaries are higher. So I hear social workers say to me all the time, like, we are so far as a field from this other area of practice. And I say, no, we're not actually. If you look at us apples to apples and you look at clinical social workers next to LPCCs, clinical social workers next to LMFTs, we are not that far off. But if you look at all social workers compared to each of those, yes, we are off, and that's why. So I want you to look really critically at the data. This is something that we at NASW and nationally have been working with these government agencies that pull national data and making sure that they are articulating this correctly. I talk with our folks at the Minnesota Department of Health. That's where we get a lot of our workforce data from, and that is an important differentiation that we need to make. So Again, be really critically thoughtful when you're looking at data on salaries for social workers. Okay, now with that, I want to move to another area that I think is important for Social Work Month. I think the time is right for NASW membership. Some of you who are not NASW members currently are going to be like, man, she did the sales pitch. And here's the deal, folks. First of all, I have to because you're here and you're getting a free CEU from us, but also because I really do think that the time is right for us to have a stronger voice in Minnesota. Our legislators are hearing from us. I get calls and emails literally every week from all sorts of people across Minnesota that are saying, hey, what do you think? What do social workers think about this? Can you weigh in on this? Do you want to be on this bill? Do you, and when they say you, they're saying not me, Karen Goodenough, they're saying us as social workers, okay? So for the first time ever in recent history, NASW Minnesota is pairing Social Work Month with our first ever membership drive for NASW. Many of you here today are NASW members, and some are new and some have been consistent members for decades, and I want to thank all of you. For serious, folks. We are a professional association. That means we are only as strong as the number of members we have. And I want to encourage all of you who have never been members or who have let your membership lapse, or know other people who are not members or have let their membership lapse, that it is really important that you ante into our work, our collective work as a profession. The last few years, I think, have really brought about some unprecedented challenges to our state and to our profession. And as I said, we are working to lift up the voice of social workers in Minnesota. Now, people often say to me things like, hey, what are you doing about this issue? What does NASW think about this? And I often push back on people and say, are you an NASW member? And if they say yes, then I say, well, what do you think about it? And what do you think I should say about that? What do you think should be our stance on that? Right? So NASW is not Karen Goodenough's thoughts on the world. It's not Shireen Retta, my chapter coordinator, who couldn't be with us today, but she's amazing, right? But it's not the world by Karen and Shireen or Jenny, our lobbyist. It is the world based on all of us in Minnesota, all of us social workers in Minnesota, and what do we think? NASW was started in 1955 when 7 social work associations came together to form a stronger body. They said at that time, we will be stronger if we are together. We want one voice for our profession. So it was the American Association of Social Workers, the American Association of Medical Social Workers, Psychiatric Social Workers, the school social workers, the group social workers, Association for the Study of Community Organization, and the Social Work Research Group. If anyone wants that list, I'm happy to send it to you. But that was the group in 55 that came together and said, let's be one. Let's be stronger in our voice together nationally and at the each state level. And I think what's happened over the course of now several decades, we all want to talk amongst ourselves, right? So we have split ourselves off, and we have a bunch of different, and I want to say really awesome, other social work associations in our state. But the reality is that when we do that, we separate our power. We become, I believe, watered down and muted in our voices. We at NASW are the only group that has both a national office, a state chapter, paid staff in our state. Like, we have the infrastructure to lift up our profession in our state. And I have just under 2,000 members. And if all 17,000 of us across the state would ante in as members of NASW, I cannot even tell you the amazing things we would accomplish for social work in Minnesota. It would blow all of our minds. For serious, we would be a powerhouse for human services that people, have never seen before. And I have to keep saying it because I believe that in my soul. I really, and if I wasn't in my current role, I would still say that. So I hope you'll all really seriously consider anteing in and being members of NASW in the year ahead. And let's see what we can do, okay? It's also a great time for you to tell your employer how important NASW is to you and to our profession, and encourage them to pay for your membership. Some of you are like, what? I never thought about asking my boss to pay for NASW membership. We are seeing more and more social workers across our state who are saying to their employers, hey, NASW is important. They work on all of these policy issues that we care about in our agency and we want to see changed. They also work on behalf of my profession. As a member, I get a ton of free CEUs. I get a ton of discounted CEUs for really cool things. And there's all kinds of other perks of membership that I get. And it's a couple $100, and I want to use maybe there's a continuing ed budget. For those of you who are students, it's only $60 a year. So if you're working somewhere, maybe you're in a placement, like for example, at NASW, we pay the membership dues for our interns. It's a value added little thing that we can contribute. And then they get the resources of NASW nationally also. And they have to be members, so they're going to work on behalf of all of us too. But you as internship supervisors, you could pay that little $60 for your students, right? The just over 100 for your bachelor's level people, a couple hundred for your master's level people, and we would be so much stronger for that. So that's my sales pitch. NASW is working on all sorts of things. I think it's just interesting for all of us to see that, and again, I'm sending these out, so I'm going through this fast, but NASW Minnesota is sitting just under 2,000 members. And over the past few years, we have been one of the fastest growing chapters in the country, which is so fun and cool. As NASW has chapters across the entire country, 55 chapters, and we are legally, financially, and programmatically under one organization, this national association, but we also have a ton of autonomy as chapters. So each chapter has its own board of directors that develops our unique programs and stances on things, and we have a ton of autonomy to decide what are we doing in Minnesota. I just love to show people this little map so you can see where we're really strong across the country. And those chapters on the map, those green ones in particular, those, I call them mega chapters, they're large mega chapters. They have over 5,000 members, some of them upwards of 10,000 members or more. They have a team of staff people. They do amazing continuing ed stuff. They provide more free stuff to their members than you could imagine. Because if I had 10,000 of our 17,000 social workers as members, I could provide a ton of free CEUs to all of you because we wouldn't have to worry about bringing in income from our continuing ed in order to run the chapter. So these are things I just want in your brains. And just a note that whenever you attend CEs from the chapter, you are supporting our policy work and all of the other things we do on behalf of the profession in Minnesota. So if you're comparing our CE event to someone else's and you're like, I don't know, they both look great, come to ours because you know it's actually, we're a nonprofit, we're actually not doing anything but supporting social workers, and that helps us immensely. Just a note that our slate of nominees for our board is going to open up in just a few weeks. So if any of you are thinking about a leadership position in the chapter, now is also the time for you to step up. I'd love to hear from you. So Alicia's probably done it already, but Alicia, put in the chat my email address. So if people are hearing any of the things I'm talking about and would like to touch base, tell them to send me a note. Just a note for all of you who are not using all of the cool benefits that you get from NASW national membership, make sure you check out the benefits pages on socialworkers.org and utilize some of these other cool benefits. Alicia, I see you popped up. Are there questions from the audience we should take right now?
I was just wondering if you enable the chat because I don't think we are able to ask questions.
Are you looking in where it says questions?
I don't have a questions tab.
Oh, okay. Well, I do. So Alicia, I will keep doing that. The chat is where you can send things out to people. Okay, the questions from our audience come to us through the questions tab and they're coming to me. So I've been answering little things as I've been going here. So I think we're okay on that. Are you able to send things out in the chat, all of those links that we've been talking about?
I have not been able to because I don't have the send chat to all audience.
You don't. All right. I'm sorry, folks. That's a tech glitch. This is what happens when our amazing Shreen Redda is not with us. So thanks for letting me know that, Alicia. what we'll do, folks, is everything I've talked about and said there's links to things, we'll go ahead and send that list of links out to everyone after today's session. So no worries on that. And we'll also post it with the recording link on YouTube. So if you're watching the recording, you can also check out all of the links to things that we're talking about. Someone did ask in the questions just recently, how many members are NASW Minnesota currently? We've been hovering in the high 1800s for the last year or so. I always say like just under 2,000 because everyone's membership expires at different times of the year. And so over the course of the year, we have probably over just 2,000 members, but at any one particular time, we're just in the high 1800s. Again, just under 2,000 compared to just over 17,000 licensed people in our state. Also, unlicensed people can also be a member. So if you're a person who's exempt, you're working for a county, you're like, I don't have to be licensed, you can still be a member of NASW and support our profession in that way. And again, folks, I'm watching the questions tab. So if any of you have questions, please go ahead and send a note out there. All right, perfect. All right, just a couple other things I want to highlight. And no, to the person who's asking in the tab, would it be possible to ask question by speaking versus typing? I'm sorry. So we used this platform today because we had so many people register for the event, which meant our regular Zoom room couldn't hold it. So we're in our GoToMeeting platform, which does not allow us to let you unmute. So my apologies for that. Whenever possible, we use Zoom so people can unmute and share and ask questions. So please go ahead and drop your questions in there. I am seeing them and I'm trying to respond to them just in my comments as I go. And I won't call anyone out by name if you drop a question in today. Yeah, and someone commented, I didn't know that NASW membership got me membership in the Minnesota chapter. So we are one association. When you join NASW nationally. You go to socialworkers.org/join or join NASW. Either one of those links are going to get you there. When you join, you automatically get membership in your state chapter. I'm just going to put that slide back up again. So you see on this little slide, automatic chapter membership. That's just part of it. So people are like, how do I become a member of NASW Minnesota? And I say, you don't. You become a member of NASW. And if you live in Minnesota, you get membership in our chapter. The other just caveat to that is if you live across state lines, so say you're a person who lives half the year here and half there, or you winter somewhere or whatever, or you live in one state and work in one state, whatever, for whatever reason, you can choose which state chapter you want to be a member of. You just tell member services which chapter you want to be a member of. So if you like what we're doing in Minnesota and you want to hear more from us and you want to get the member rate for everything we do or all the free stuff we do, tell NASW National that you want to be a member of our Minnesota chapter. And we have several people who live and work across state lines and choose our chapter to be part of. All right. Okay. Also, just a note too, that if you ever see something happening, because we're one association, if you ever see something happening at another NASW chapter and it looks like they have a member rate for something and you can't seem to access the member rate for something, you should just reach out to them directly, the chapter directly first. That's probably the easiest. And say, hey, I'm an NASW member, but I can't seem to get your rate. Can I get it? We get those from other people in the country, and I would be happy to also help you with that. So if you're struggling to get the member rate for something someone else is doing, you're a member. You are absolutely a member of every chapter because you're a member of NASW. We're one association. So just a little insider tidbit on that too. All right. I just wanted to call out that we've updated our strategic plan as a chapter for 22 to 25. Our mission's the same. Our values are slightly different. We've added in this one about building bridges. I'm not going to spend much time on this right now, but I just wanted to call it out. So if you're interested in seeing more about our strategic plan, you can go to NASW-MN.socialworkers.org. That's our website, and go to About Us, and there's a whole little section in there, and you can download a copy of our strategic plan and learn all about all the details of it. This is just some little things that are kind of our core strategies for the coming year. All right. I'm just going to check the questions because there have been a couple things here people are saying. Um, oh, that's a great idea. Someone's asking, do you have a good handout or info sheet that we could share with employers along with our request that they pay for membership? I don't, but I will. I think that's a fantastic idea. So we will put something together for you. And make sure we send it out to everyone. Will there be a quiz or survey following up on the continuing ed credit? No, you might be a person from outside Minnesota. In Minnesota, our CE credits, you're not required to take a quiz in order to get the CEs. You also, in Minnesota, do not have to have pre-approved CEs in order to get credit for it. So anything NASW does in Minnesota is pre-approved by our Board of Social Work because we are listed in statute as a provider of CEs that are approved. However, other states have requirements like you have to take a quiz in order to get your CE, or you have to attend something that's been pre-approved by our board. Our board in Minnesota has a process that I've said many times, some of you have heard me say this, I think is misleading, where there is a process where people, for an organization, can apply to be an approved CE provider, but the requirement by law is not that you all attend only pre-approved CEs. That is true in some states, not in Minnesota. Okay, so if you're say your synagogue, your mosque, your church, your community center, your local club of any sort puts on a training and it's something that you think aligns with social work practice and would be helpful for your practice, you can count that CE. It does not have to be approved by our Board of Social Work. Okay, happy to answer more questions about that anytime if people have questions. All right, and folks, just a note that by signing on to the GoToWebinar link, we know that you attended today, so you will get your CE link. So no worries about that, folks. All right. I also think that it's time for social workers to get all the professional development that they need for what's ahead. Okay, so I want all of our social workers across our state to get continuing education that pushes you toward your growth edge. Okay, everything we provide at NASW Minnesota, we try to make sure that it is a higher level, a deeper understanding. We don't do anything almost ever. Like we're doing Advocacy 101 at during Advocacy Week because everybody needs a refresher on that once in a while. But our CEs are meant for higher, deeper level because about 80% of our members have an MSW. We have a very high level of master's level social workers in Minnesota. And so if you want the introduction to something, the start of something, there are lots of other providers in Minnesota that provide the intro to all kinds of topics. We don't do that. We do the things that are kind of that next level stuff, the stuff that gets you thinking, the stuff that gets you to the next thing in your career. And I want to continue to do that. But part of us being able to do that is you all need to tell us what you need and what you want. So if you come to any of our events, usually at the end of our survey at the end, we ask, what are you looking for CEs? What are topics, issues, things that you want to hear more about? We absolutely read and listen to those. You can also always send a note to Shireen or I. You can go on our website and just do the little auto form online. It sends us an email and say, hey, I really need a training on this. Are you guys ever going to do something on that? And if we're not, we'll think about it. We'll put it on our list of things we're thinking about. So I want y'all to weigh in with us on that. So you'll see all sorts of things coming up in the year ahead that are things that are like, man, cool. I've never heard that before. It's kind of cutting edge. And that's because we're hearing from people that's what they need. We just did a 2-day workshop on starting a private practice in Minnesota. All things you need to start a private practice in Minnesota. It was super well attended. People really liked it. We had amazing presenters who are awesome people, solid, active members of our chapter. We're going to do that again next January because so many people said we loved it. You should do this again. And so many people said I couldn't attend. Please do it again. So there are things like that we're doing. We're also putting together a new leadership certificate because so many people are looking to move ahead in their careers and maybe didn't take any macro classes. And you need a refresher on, or maybe some baseline knowledge on budgeting and all kinds of things. So we're putting together some new things on that. So lots of things for you to look for. We're also doing some really cool cutting edge things like our symposium right now. If you're not taking part in our 5-month symposium, it's one session per month for 5 months on social work and abolition called Revisioning. Look at our website, NASW-MN.org, learn about it. It's not too late to register. Here's the breakdown of what we're covering in each of the sessions. In our next session, we'll be talking about workforce issues and pay and all of that sort of thing. Last week's session was all about reimagining structures of our profession, and we talked a ton about licensure and all sorts of details about licensure. So if you haven't already attended, you can still register, you can watch the recordings of whatever you've missed, and then you can jump into any of the future ones in person if you're able to, or watch the recordings too. We also have Advocacy Week coming up. I want to make sure all social workers across the state know that Social Work Advocacy Week is online this year. It is not our traditional social work day at the Capitol. Several things are closed up at the Capitol right now. You can't even go in the House offices. So we've decided to hold this event virtually again. And this year we are holding it throughout the week. The rally, that part that people have come to that you love, you remember as a student maybe, will be Monday, 11:30 to 1 o'clock. It will be Ramadan, so we're not saying over lunch. I just want to call that out for all of our folks who will be celebrating Ramadan at the time. But our opening session will be 11:30 to 1 on April 4th, and will be our kickoff. We're going to hear from several legislators. We've invited the governor's office. You'll be hearing some updates on kind of what's been happening at the legislature this session, what things are moving and not moving. We'll have that Advocacy 101 session if you want a refresher. And then on Tuesday and Wednesday, we'll be announcing soon where each of these detailed sessions shake out in terms of times, but I wanted to give you the days and times just so you could block them, and we'll let you know. And then if you register for Online Advocacy Week, you can let us know if you want us to set up a meeting with your legislators, and we will be happy to set that up, and we'll be happy to staff it and make sure that there's a host there and you don't feel uncomfortable and you'll know what to say and all of that sort of stuff. We'll help you feel supported in that. So go to NASW-MN.org. You can look for the information on Online Advocacy Week, and the link to register is there. All right, there's some questions dropping in the chat, so let me just see what those are. Send info about signing up for advocacy as well. Yes, we can absolutely do that. I'll make sure that that link in the flyer for Advocacy Week comes to you with all the materials from today's session. In personal or virtual, the symposium is all virtual. Advocacy Week is all virtual. Everything the chapter's doing in the year ahead is virtual, let me say. We are not planning anything in person for the near future. We are thinking about that, and we'll be paying attention to what's happening. We have a new policy at the chapter about when we can start doing in-person things. So just hold tight and we'll let you know, but just assume that literally everything we do is virtual. Our board meets virtually, all of our committees meet virtually, and we did that even prior to COVID because we want social workers all across the state to be involved in our chapter, to be able to come to our CE events, to be engaged with us. And so we don't want geography to be a barrier for anyone. So yes, look for everything we're doing to be virtual, and we'll let you know when there's some in-person stuff happening again. I think we'll get to that. We absolutely will get to that eventually, but we will continue to provide as much as we can in an accessible format for folks. I also want to make sure people know we're doing this supervisor certification series. I'm doing another version of it coming up here in April and May. If you're looking for the 30 CEs to be a licensure supervisor, that's a great one to attend. We constantly have tons of CEs coming up. Here's just some March things that are happening. So just a note on that. We also have tons of recordings of sessions in our online CE Institute. And again, we're sending these links out to all of you and these slides. But again, you can get all of your continuing ed in this next round of licensure renewal through virtual pre-recorded things. So watch the things on our YouTube channel, read books, listen to podcasts, count those as part of your CEs. Watch things on our online CE Institute. All of those count. I also want to hear from all of you. So anything along the way that you need from our chapter, I'm a person. We are your chapter of NASW. We absolutely want to hear from you. So please email, call us, send us notes in the chat. I will take a peek at the chat things that I've missed today that were not questions. I'll look back at those after we all sign off too and follow up with folks. In closing today, I want to say thank you to all of you. And I want to say the time is right for you to thank social workers also. It is a great time of year in March to show appreciation to others great social workers that you know. And I want to challenge each and every one of you throughout the month of March to send some thank you notes to great social workers you know. Old colleagues, old professors, old friends, new friends, people you've just met recently and you're like, that person's cool. They're doing cool work. Send them a note. Email it if you don't have a hard copy email address. But if you have a snail mail address, write it on a piece of paper, jot it on anything. Say thank you for what you do and drop it in the mail. It would make a social worker smile. I swear to you, it would make a social worker smile. And I just, again, want to thank you for all that you do as social workers across our state. It is 1:02. I'm putting up here my contact info. If you need ethics consultation, you want to get engaged with the chapter, you have questions about anything I talked about today, or if you want to argue with me about any statements I made, I'm happy to go toe to toe with you on any of it too. I want you to also follow us on social media and watch your inbox for other ways to engage in our membership drive this March. As I said, it's really important that we grow our membership in Minnesota so we can be a stronger association for you. There's also going to be prizes, and everyone likes prizes. So thank you all for being with us today. I'm going to keep the recording going for a few minutes and check out the chat here. And if there are questions I can answer right now, I will continue to do that. But if you have to hop off, I just want to thank you for being here. So let me see if there's other things in the chat that I missed here. So we're going to do that handout for your employers. Thanks to all of you who are saying thank you to all of us. Let's see. Okay, we talked about signing up for Advocacy Week, so we got that. All right, people are asking to clarify, are we able to get all of our CEs through virtual? Okay, so let me say that again. So currently, yes, through September, the Board of Social Work just extended the variance so you can get all of your continuing ed through virtual means or independent study through September. So if you're in a renewal cycle right now, okay, like I am, I'm not renewing until my birthday month of next year. At least between now and September, if I got all 40 of my CEs done between now and September, I can do them all through virtual or independent study. So I can read books and count those hours on anything that's related to social work practice. So anyway, we can talk about details on that. I can listen to podcasts. I can listen to speakers who were online. I can watch pre-recorded content like things on a YouTube channel, things, anything that we do that's free like this. If I record it and I put it up somewhere for you to access it, you can absolutely count that. But yes, through September, we are working with our Board of Social Work to change that ongoing. I would like to see that be extended ongoing, not just in the pandemic. So we are working with our board right now, and not just our board, we're working with the legislature. We have a bill right now at the legislature that will expand the number of the number of supervision hours that we can get through virtual formats to 100%. Okay, so that's one that our board allowed during COVID, and we're trying to get that extended into the future. And we're going to do the same thing with this CEU requirement also. Okay. So yes, you can get all of your CEs in Minnesota. I want to say, remember folks, licensure is different in every state. So if you're licensed somewhere outside of Minnesota, I only talk about, this is my dance space, right? I'm staying in my scope of practice. I can tell you what's true in Minnesota. So check your licensing boards. People are just, thanking me for updated info. Are there any other questions from anyone? All right. With that, I want to wish you all a fantastic social work month. Thank you for all you do, and I'll see you soon. Take care, everyone.